The silence didn't begin with fear. It began with 3 impossible words. Long before anyone remembered what those words were, the silence itself became legend. Veterans who had survived supernova sieges spoke of it in hushed voices. Historians archived it as the precise instant when the balance of the galaxy shifted forever. Across millions of inhabited worlds, every quantum broadcast, diplomatic relay, and military surveillance feed seemed to hold its breath, as if the universe itself sensed that history had reached an irreversible crossroads. Something ancient was about to end. Something entirely new was about to begin. At the center of it all floated the Galactic Council chamber, a breathtaking structure unlike anything humanity had ever built. Suspended inside the hollow heart of a dying red giant, the colossal chamber appeared carved from living crystal that pulsed with veins of molten light. Rivers of plasma flowed beneath transparent floors, casting rippling crimson reflections across towering pillars that stretched into darkness beyond sight. Above, thousands of glowing banners drifted without gravity, each representing a civilization that had survived the impossible and earned the right to stand among the rulers of the stars. Every surface shimmered with technology so advanced it felt almost supernatural, while invisible fields carried whispers across impossible distances. The air vibrated with a low harmonic resonance, a sound produced by the star itself, a constant reminder that unimaginable power surrounded everyone inside. This was no ordinary Senate. It was where civilizations lived or died. Entire species had vanished after a single vote within these walls. Empires spanning 10,000 systems had risen because of favors granted here, only to crumble centuries later when those favors were withdrawn. The Council did not conquer planets with armies alone. It conquered futures. Its decrees rewrote borders, erased governments, and determined which races would flourish, and which would quietly disappear into forgotten corners of the galaxy. For over 8 million years, no civilization had openly challenged its authority. Those who tried had become warnings instead of winners. Now, standing alone beneath the endless circle of towering alien delegates, was a single human. Ambassador Elias Ward looked impossibly small against the overwhelming scale of the chamber. His dark diplomatic uniform bore no extravagant jewels, no ceremonial armor, no floating insignias announcing ancient bloodlines. Only the blue and white emblem of Earth rested over his heart, simple and unassuming. Around him, hundreds of alien eyes studied him with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. Some species towered over him on mechanical limbs. Others floated inside transparent spheres filled with luminous liquid. A few existed only as shifting clouds of energy wrapped inside containment fields. They had all come expecting the same thing. Submission. Elias remained perfectly still. His breathing was slow and controlled, but beneath that calm exterior, every instinct screamed that he stood inside the most dangerous room in the known universe. He could feel thousands of eyes measuring every movement, searching for weakness, waiting for the slightest crack in his composure. Behind him stood no bodyguards. No fleet. No army waiting to rescue him. Earth had entrusted its future to a single voice. He lifted his gaze and met the eyes of the Council Supreme without hesitation. A faint smile appeared. Not the smile of arrogance. The smile of someone who already knew how this story ended. The subtle expression sent an almost imperceptible ripple through the chamber. Ancient translators paused for a fraction of a second. Autonomous recording drones slowed in midair. Even the chamber's living crystal seemed to dim, as though sensing a disturbance beyond calculation. Conversations faded. The endless murmur of diplomacy dissolved into absolute stillness. Then Ambassador Elias Ward took one quiet step forward. He leaned toward the Council. And with a calmness that no one present would ever forget, he prepared to speak the 3 words that would freeze an entire galaxy. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy by being the strongest. It had survived by becoming the civilization no one could predict. Barely 3 centuries earlier, Earth had been an overlooked world orbiting an ordinary yellow star at the edge of insignificant trade routes. Most ancient species dismissed humans as another brief evolutionary experiment, a race that would burn brightly for a few centuries before collapsing under the weight of its own ambition. They expected internal wars, political fragmentation, environmental failure. Instead, humanity did something the elder civilizations had long forgotten how to do. It adapted. Every setback became a lesson. Every defeat became a blueprint. While galactic empires invested fortunes into larger war fleets and planet-killing weapons, human scientists quietly rewrote the rules of engineering. Explorers ventured into unstable nebulae no sensible navigator would enter. Diplomats negotiated peace between rival species that had hated one another for millennia. Engineers transformed dead moons into thriving colonies, while ordinary settlers carried forests, oceans, and entire ecosystems across the stars inside generation arcs that became symbols of hope rather than conquest. The galaxy noticed, but far too late. Now that relentless spirit had brought humanity to the greatest political stage ever constructed. Ambassador Elias Ward crossed the polished crystal bridge leading toward the council chamber's central platform. Every measured step echoed through the immense hall, accompanied by the distant vibration of the dying star imprisoned beneath the structure. Above him, massive holographic constellations rotated slowly in perfect silence, displaying thousands of civilizations connected through glowing hyperspace corridors that resembled veins carrying life across the galaxy itself. Every light represented a living world. Every connection represented influence, commerce, or military power. It was less a map than a portrait of civilization. And somewhere among those countless stars, Earth's systems glowed with a quiet blue light. Elias allowed himself one brief glance upward. Home. He thought of oceans crashing against rocky coastlines beneath open skies untouched by orbital shields. He remembered crowded city streets where dozens of languages blended into one endless conversation. He remembered children laughing beneath gravity instead of artificial habitats, farmers tending fields on worlds that had once been barren rock, engineers working through sleepless nights because they believed tomorrow could always be better than today. Those memories steadied him. Because he knew the truth hidden beneath the ceremony surrounding this meeting. Officially, his mission was simple. Request humanity's admission into the Council's highest governing circle, a recognition reserved for civilizations deemed mature enough to help shape the future of the galaxy. Unofficially, he had already been warned. Encrypted intelligence gathered over months had painted a darker picture than anyone outside Earth's leadership could imagine. Friendly diplomats had suddenly gone silent. Long-standing trade agreements were mysteriously delayed. Entire council committees refused direct communication. Behind closed doors, meetings had multiplied while humanity received fewer invitations. Too many coincidences. Too much secrecy. Someone was moving pieces across the board. As Elias reached the center of the chamber, towering projections burst to life around him. The holographic galaxy expanded until it surrounded every delegate in breathtaking detail. Human colonies shimmered across dozens of sectors, connected by brilliant trade routes that pulsed with steady streams of cargo and exploration vessels. Then the colors changed. One after another, foreign emblems appeared over those same human systems. Red. Gold. Silver. Entire sectors were quietly divided between rival empires, each border drawn with cold mathematical precision. Resource worlds were assigned to industrial syndicates. Strategic colonies disappeared beneath military jurisdictions. Prosperous frontier settlements were labeled as administrative acquisitions, their futures decided without a single human vote. The chamber remained silent. For the council, this was merely logistics. For Elias, it was the first undeniable proof that humanity had never truly been invited to join the galaxy's ruling powers. It had been summoned, to witness its own inheritance being carved apart before its eyes. The accusations began with polished diplomacy, but beneath every carefully chosen word lay the unmistakable scent of war. One by one, the representatives of the galaxy's oldest civilizations rose from their towering platforms, their voices amplified through living translators that echoed across the crystal chamber like distant thunder. They spoke with practiced elegance, wrapping threats inside speeches about stability, responsibility, and the preservation of galactic order. Humanity, they claimed, was evolving too quickly. Its expansion ignored traditions that had governed the stars for millions of years. Its inventions disrupted ancient markets. Its explorers crossed invisible boundaries without asking permission from those who believed they owned the heavens. To them, Earth was not merely another young civilization. It was an uncertainty. And uncertainty terrified empires more than any weapon ever could. The supreme strategist of the Car Dominion extended a skeletal hand toward the holographic star map suspended above the chamber. At once, dozens of human systems flashed crimson. Fleet formations materialized around them, represented by countless points of cold white light. For the safety of all member civilizations, the ancient commander declared, the sole defense fleet shall be peacefully disarmed. The words sounded calm. The meaning was execution. Another delegate rose, a towering merchant sovereign whose species had controlled interstellar commerce since before humanity discovered electricity. Golden symbols spiraled around him as he proposed transferring all human trade corridors to council supervision, until emotional decision-making could no longer threaten economic equilibrium. Applause followed. Not enthusiastic. Routine. As though entire civilizations were exchanged every day like entries in a ledger. Elias Ward listened without interruption. His expression never changed. Inside, however, every sentence carved deeper into memories he had carried for years. He remembered the classified briefings before leaving Earth. Satellite images of colonies painstakingly built by families who had crossed impossible distances with nothing but hope. Mining settlements carved into frozen asteroids where children had never seen a natural sunrise. Agricultural worlds that transformed dead soil into oceans of green beneath artificial skies. Millions of ordinary lives, reduced to colored icons floating across a political map. The council never saw people. Only assets. A ripple of uneasy silence spread as another accusation echoed through the chamber. Humans innovate without restraint. They refuse proper oversight. They alter technologies reserved for elder civilizations. They spread dangerous ideas. Each statement struck harder than the last. Not because they were true. Because they revealed exactly what frightened the council. Humanity solved problems the old empires had accepted as permanent. Around the circular chamber, several younger civilizations shifted uneasily. Some had once traded freely with Earth. Others owed their survival to human medical breakthroughs or disaster relief missions delivered without demands for tribute. Elias caught brief glimpses of familiar faces lowering their eyes. None spoke. None dared. Fear had become the council's official language. Beyond the immense crystal walls, the galaxy itself reflected that fear. Orbital surveillance feeds streamed silently across hidden military displays. Thousands of autonomous council warships drifted into formation along the borders of human territory. Planet cracker cannons unfolded like metallic flowers beneath artificial suns. Carrier fleets emerged from hyperspace with terrifying precision, each maneuver synchronized through quantum command networks older than recorded history. No declaration had been made. No missiles launched. But every commander understood. The countdown had already begun. Back on Earth, billions watched through delayed quantum broadcasts. Families gathered in homes, factories, military bunkers, research stations, and colony domes scattered across dozens of star systems. Soldiers stood motionless beside silent launch controls. Scientists stared at encrypted telemetry that confirmed the impossible buildup unfolding across known space. Children asked frightened questions their parents could not answer. Would there be war? No one knew. There would be no dramatic rescue fleet bursting through hyperspace. No hidden superweapon waiting beneath Earth's oceans. No miracle descending from the stars. Only one man stood beneath the weight of an entire civilization. Elias inhaled slowly. He could feel every heartbeat inside the chamber. Every hostile stare. Every silent ally too frightened to intervene. The council believed it had cornered humanity. It believed pressure would force surrender. It had no idea that the human standing before them had never come to beg for acceptance. He had come carrying a decision that would change the fate of the galaxy forever. The Council Supreme rose from his towering throne with the slow certainty of a being who had never known defeat. His immense form shimmered beneath layers of ceremonial light, each movement sending ripples through robes woven from living starlight. Around him, the crystal chamber dimmed as thousands of floating glyphs assembled into the official seal of galactic authority. For millions of years, that symbol had represented the final word in every dispute among the stars. No civilization had ever ignored it. None had ever survived defying it. The vote is concluded, the Supreme declared, his voice resonating through the chamber like the tolling of an ancient bell. By unanimous decree of the Galactic Council, the territories, fleets, and strategic infrastructure of the Human Confederation shall be placed under administrative supervision, effective immediately. A pulse of golden light swept across the chamber. The decree had been entered into galactic law. Delegates relaxed. Some exchanged satisfied glances. Others quietly activated communication nodes, preparing to notify waiting admirals and corporate governors that humanity had officially become another managed civilization. The decision felt inevitable. History, once again, belonged to the Council. Only one figure remained perfectly still. Ambassador Elias Ward. For a long moment, he lowered his eyes toward the glowing floor, saying nothing. The silence stretched just long enough to convince everyone they had finally broken humanity's resolve. Across the galaxy, billions watching the live transmission leaned closer to their screens. On Earth, military commanders held their breath. Colony governors clenched trembling hands. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, exploration crews paused their work to hear the answer that would determine the future of their species. Then Elias looked up. His face was calm. Not defeated. Free. He stepped forward until he stood directly beneath the towering seal of the Council. We decline membership. 3 words. No anger. No raised voice. No dramatic speech. Only quiet certainty. For the first time in living memory, absolute silence swallowed the Galactic Council. The translators hesitated, as if unwilling to believe what they had processed. Mechanical recorders froze in mid-transcription. Ancient delegates stared without blinking, convinced they had misunderstood a primitive language. Membership in the Galactic Council was not an offer, it was the greatest privilege any civilization could receive. Entire empires had fought century-long wars merely for the chance to petition for entry. And humanity had refused. Confusion spread like a shockwave. Before anyone could respond, crimson warning symbols exploded across every holographic display in the chamber. 1 alert. Then 10. Then thousands. The ceremonial star map dissolved into a storm of flashing emergency signals. Critical navigation failure. Primary hyperspace corridor inaccessible. Gateway synchronization lost. Interstellar relay collapse detected. Delegates sprang to their feet. Military commanders barked frantic orders into quantum communicators. Across the holographic galaxy, the glowing web of council-controlled hyperspace lanes began disappearing one after another. Ancient routes that had connected civilizations for millions of years simply vanished. Entire sectors blinked into isolation as navigation beacons failed simultaneously across known space. "No," whispered one senior navigator. "That's impossible." But it wasn't. Encrypted intelligence flooded the Council's private networks. Humanity had discovered something years earlier. Not a weapon. Not a fleet. A completely new method of faster-than-light travel. While the Council spent centuries protecting ancient hyperspace gateways and taxing every civilization forced to use them, human physicists had quietly rewritten the mathematics of interstellar navigation itself. Their ships no longer required fixed corridors. They folded space through naturally occurring quantum currents invisible to every Council sensor. The old roads no longer mattered. Neither did the empire built upon controlling them. Trade fleets became stranded. Military armadas found themselves trapped behind collapsing logistics networks. Entire economies lost contact with resource worlds in a matter of minutes. 8 million years of political dominance unraveled before the eyes of those who believed it could never end. And in the middle of the growing panic, Ambassador Elias Ward simply watched. Not with triumph. Not with vengeance. But with the quiet expression of someone who had known all along that true power does not come from ruling the stars. It comes from no longer needing permission to cross them. Chaos spread through the galaxy with terrifying speed, not because humanity attacked, but because the foundation beneath every great empire suddenly disappeared. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, disciplined order dissolved into frantic desperation. Delegates who had spent centuries speaking with flawless composure now shouted over one another, their voices overlapping in dozens of languages as emergency alerts flooded every display. Military commanders barked impossible orders into encrypted communicators. Economic ministers demanded explanations that no one could provide. Across the immense holographic map, entire sectors flickered in and out of contact like dying stars, while ancient hyperspace corridors, once considered eternal, continued vanishing one after another. The galaxy's nervous system had been severed. Far beyond the Council chamber, fleets launched exactly as their protocols demanded. Thousands of warships accelerated toward human space, engines burning with the brilliance of newborn suns. Carrier groups unfolded attack formations. Autonomous drone swarms raced ahead to establish firing solutions. Planetary siege platforms powered their gravity lances until space itself shimmered around them. Then, nothing. Navigation systems failed. Target coordinates dissolved into meaningless calculations. Every jump solution collapsed before execution. One by one, the massive fleets emerged from hyperspace into empty regions far from their intended destinations, stranded without functioning routes or reliable communication. Admirals stared in disbelief as tactical displays filled with error messages that had never existed in military databases. Entire armadas, once capable of conquering civilizations, drifted helplessly through the void, unable even to reach the battlefields they had been sent to dominate. For the first time in 8 million years, overwhelming military superiority meant absolutely nothing. Back in the Council chamber, realization spread like ice through every delegate present. The Council had never truly ruled through strength. It had ruled through dependency. Every civilization relied upon its hyperspace gateways. Every economy relied upon its regulated trade corridors. Every military campaign relied upon routes the Council controlled. And humanity had quietly stepped beyond that system years ago. Without firing a single weapon. They had made the old empire obsolete. Yet the greatest surprise was still to come. Across countless isolated star systems, distress calls began flooding every remaining communication network. Civilian stations lost access to food shipments. Medical colonies ran out of life-saving supplies. Passenger transports became stranded between stars. Entire worlds, innocent of the Council's ambitions, suddenly faced starvation and collapse. Many expected humanity to celebrate. Others expected revenge. Instead, thousands of unidentified vessels emerged from impossible folds in space. Human ships. Not battleships. Relief convoys. Their white hulls carried the blue emblem of Earth alongside universal symbols for medical assistance, engineering support, and civilian evacuation. They arrived without demanding surrender. Without political conditions. without territorial claims. Doctors entered hospitals belonging to former enemies. Engineers restored failing power grids on worlds that had voted against humanity only hours earlier. Exploration crews rescued alien merchant vessels trapped in collapsing jump corridors, towing them safely through navigation paths no other civilization could even perceive. On one isolated colony, frightened children looked upward expecting invasion. Instead, they watched human transports descend through crimson clouds carrying food, medicine, and portable fusion generators. No speeches. No triumph. Only help. Watching the reports unfold, Ambassador Elias Ward stood quietly before the stunned council. He remembered the countless debates back on Earth. Some had argued that if the galaxy ever turned against humanity, they should answer cruelty with overwhelming force. Others believed true strength meant proving humanity could become something better than the civilizations that feared it. Standing amid the collapse of an ancient empire, Elias finally understood which vision had won. Because anyone can build power through fear. Empires had done that for millions of years. But only a civilization confident in its own future chooses compassion when revenge would be easier. And as human ships became the lifeline connecting worlds abandoned by their rulers, a truth echoed across the stars, a truth no council decree could erase. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. It had given the galaxy something far more difficult. A reason to believe in each other again. Months passed, and the galaxy slowly learned that history rarely ends with explosions. More often, it ends with empty halls. The once glorious Galactic Council chamber still floated within the heart of the dying red giant, its living crystal walls glowing with the same crimson light they always had. The molten rivers beneath its transparent floors still flowed in silent currents, and the towering banners of ancient civilizations still drifted high above the chamber without gravity. Yet everything had changed. The grand amphitheater that had once echoed with confident speeches and unanimous decrees now stood almost deserted. Hundreds of diplomatic platforms remained unoccupied, their lights extinguished like forgotten stars. The silence that filled the chamber no longer carried authority. It carried regret. The civilizations that had once ruled through fear found themselves confronting an unfamiliar reality. Their fleets still existed, but they no longer commanded the galaxy's trade. Their laws remained written in crystalline archives, but fewer worlds bothered to enforce them. Their titles still sounded magnificent, yet they inspired little beyond memories of an age that had quietly slipped away. Across thousands of systems, independent colonies and former council members were choosing a different future, not because they had been conquered, but because they had finally been offered a choice. Far beyond the old hyperspace network, humanity continued building. New navigation gateways shimmered into existence across unexplored regions of space, each one unfolding like a flower of blue-white light against the darkness. Unlike the Council's ancient corridors, these routes belonged to no empire. They carried no taxes, demanded no allegiance, and recognized no privileged civilization. Every world willing to cooperate received access. Former enemies traveled beside longtime allies. Scientists exchanged discoveries without political barriers. Merchant vessels crossed distances once believed impossible, while rescue ships reached isolated colonies in hours instead of months. For the first time in galactic history, the stars felt closer together. On a quiet morning beneath Earth's blue sky, Ambassador Elias Ward stood on a balcony overlooking the headquarters of the newly established Stellar Cooperative. Below him, representatives from dozens of species walked together through gardens where alien trees grew beside human forests. Children of different worlds laughed as they chased shimmering drones through fountains reflecting both Earth sunlight and distant alien moons projected above the plaza. Conversations echoed in hundreds of languages, yet somehow they sounded like one shared future. Elias closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered the unbearable silence inside the council chamber months earlier. The hostile stares. The certainty that one wrong sentence could ignite a war across the stars. He remembered standing alone beneath the weight of an entire civilization, knowing that every decision he made would become part of history. The burden had been immense. But so had humanity's faith. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. The council has sent another delegation. Elias turned toward the young officer waiting respectfully behind him. They wish to negotiate, he asked. The officer smiled faintly. No, Ambassador. They wish to join. For a long moment, Elias simply looked toward the horizon, where human exploration vessels rose silently into the morning sky before disappearing into brilliant folds of blue light. There was no satisfaction in watching old powers seek help. No desire to remind them of past arrogance. History had already delivered its lesson. Without another word, he nodded. Then opened the doors. Across the galaxy, more worlds followed. The ancient council did not fall because humanity destroyed it. It faded because humanity built something people trusted more. Generations later, historians would argue over military strategies, economic transformations, and revolutionary discoveries. They would publish countless volumes attempting to explain how an empire that endured for 8 million years could lose its influence in a single day. But children learning the story would remember something far simpler. They would remember that an entire galaxy once held its breath while one human stood alone before the greatest rulers ever known. And when the moment finally came, he changed the future with 3 quiet words. Not through fear. Not through war. But by proving that the strongest civilization is the one courageous enough to walk away from power, and wise enough to build hope in its place.